Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to today's episode of The Product Angle. On today's episode, we have someone fantastic. We've been planning this for ages, and we are super excited to have Rohini Pandhi on the session today. Welcome, Rohini.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you, and of course, Neeraj.
Hello, everyone, and I'll have the distinct honor and pleasure to ask Rohini, one, welcome you to the show, and second, do you want to introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure. Let's see. I'm Rohini. Currently the day job is at Square. I've been a product lead at Square I've been at Square for 5 years now, which is mind-boggling to me. Before then, I was in product at a lot of startups building developer tools, so APIs, SDKs, nerding out like that. And prior to all of that, I was a consultant, an engineer, and I think that's kind of like the progression. I started with engineering, went and did my MBA, then to consulting for a little bit, got into startups, and just fell in love with product. Over the last, just before I joined Square, so it's actually been about 5 years, I started a nonprofit with some friends called Transparent Collective, and we focus on underrepresented founders. And so giving them the access, the resources, the tools they need in order to succeed and make sure that they have the best possible steps to achieve growth and amazing success as part of the tech startup world.
Wow, that's awesome. Hey, so many different questions come to mind, but let's start with the easy ones first. From developer tools to payment, and very different markets, very different target markets, very different audience.
True.
How does one lead to the other? Can you share a little bit about that?
I don't know if there was like a conscious effort on my part to say I need to go from developer tools to fintech, but I think I really love product, and I think as a product person, I'm more of a generalist than anything else, and I've started to specialize within fintech over the last few years. But I think generalist PMs are pretty good at moving between industries because you're really going back to the core fundamentals of the discipline, and you're building out your own frameworks for how you solve problems, and those things are usually applicable across different domains and spaces, unless you get really deep. And so as somebody in payments now and within tech, there are really easy rabbit holes to get very deep, which is fantastic. But sometimes you can move from industry to industry. I always said, like, developers are people too. They want products to be as easy to use as anybody else wants products to be easy to use. And SMBs act the same way. The human psychology is still very true across all of those user bases. And so when you kind of get to the core of what it is somebody's hired, I use jobs to be done a lot. So the core of what somebody hires your product, then you can start building things in different ways. But I think the most fun for me is really understanding consumers or your audience or customers. So it doesn't matter if the customers are developers or SMEs within fintech.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's awesome. So our audience is, generally speaking, early to mid career product managers. And, can you talk a little bit about what your definition of roadmaps is, and from your perspective, who owns them?
Sure. I think this is probably one of the top questions I usually get. I think road mapping is usually this like thorn in everybody's side, and the questions could range from like, what tools do you use for road mapping? How do you show the right level of detail for different audiences in your roadmap? How often are those communicated? And I think it kind of circles the question of what is the definition of a roadmap, because to me, the roadmap is really like an artifact of planning. And planning is the core piece of this. Like, the process of planning is more important than the plan itself at the end of the day. And so the roadmap is an artifact of that plan, but really great PMs are able to create the process of planning and road mapping in a way that's inclusive of their teams, in a way that's strategic and thinking beyond what's happening in this next sprint, in a way that is thoughtful. And there's so many different ways, I guess, to look at it, but also rational. I guess, at the end of the day. You can have all of these grand visions, but if you can't actually drive results and build something that gets into the world, then it's all for naught. So to me, a roadmap is the plan of record on how you're executing towards your strategic goals and how the team kind of views the path to get to those strategic goals. Hopefully that made sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So you mentioned two things that are very crucial for understanding. I want you to, if you will, go a little deeper into that. You talked about the process of planning being more important than in itself of the artifact, and then inclusiveness. Can we dig a little deeper on that? What have you experienced as some of the best practices around the process of planning, and how have you ensured that smaller, larger, any size company to be as a PM be inclusive of other different functions?
Yeah, I think, and this goes to the second question, Pradeep, that you asked that I didn't actually answer, which was who owns that roadmap or who owns that plan? And to me, it's the team. It's not just the PM. If you as a PM do not have the backing of your team, you're not going to get very far on your own. And so to me, like, making sure that process is as inclusive as possible gives everyone accountability towards that process. So it's not just me saying, this is where we all want to be, right, guys? It's everyone kind of chiming in and agreeing that this is what we want to go achieve. And then everyone internalizing that metric, that plan of record. And so that we're all striving for it every day we come in and make decisions that may not be a consent-driven decision. So you want to have everyone using the same framework, saying, hey, we're going after this goal in this direction. So this is how we should think about our problems and the frameworks that we should use. So I actually go through, I think most strategic plans are usually like a year, 3 years, 5 years. And those things should be at like a business plan level of what's the market we're in, what's the market we want to capture, all that good stuff, who are our competitors. And that should be either read or have input from engineering, design, product, analytics, marketing, everyone in the team. And then the level down from strategic view, because they all kind of start coupling together, is the quarterly view. For every quarter that builds up to that year or 3 years, what are we going to do to achieve the North Star metric? What are the drivers around that? And so again, the team needs to be aware of that and needs to say, yes, we agree that these are the highest correlated drivers towards this metric that we're trying to achieve, or towards this fundamental goal we're trying to achieve. And so that comes from engineering, product, everyone again. And then you got to get into sprint planning, and there's different types of tickets and ownerships. So marketing might be doing a go-to-market plan, but with the same quarterly and yearly strategic goals in mind. Engineering is working on their tickets, and they know that this kind of work and this type of shipping X, Y, and Z will lead to those quarterly goals, which will lead to the strategic map that we've all set out together. And we check on those on a regular basis. There's backlog reviews are for that reason. Are we still on track? Do we still agree that this is the direction we want to head? We might be pivoting a little bit here and there throughout the weeks. Are we still all in unison? Are we still communicating? Still agree? And then quarterly OKR setting is the same. The reason that we do these types of habits is because we want to make sure that we're still all in agreement, and we think that there's some value in the goal that we've set out to as our destination way back when. And then yearly, same kind of thing.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for sharing that. One other thing that comes, and again, going back to the question of process and inclusiveness, many a times you see that the product vision, company's vision, strategy, roadmap, they get mixed up quite a bit.
Yeah.
If folks haven't been involved with the overall planning, they can't have visibility into the big picture stuff, they get mixed up. How do you see, from what you've experienced, not just as a PM yourself in multiple different companies, but also as a angel investor now, you're actually talking to a lot of early companies where some of the founders are actually product folks, or they bring on additional folks. How does this process work? And what are some best practices that you will recommend, one or two things to people who may be a little down in the trenches to be able to
Yep.
extract themselves out and be aligned with the overall product vision strategy and go from there?
Yeah, I think it's there's difference in time horizon that I always see, and I think everyone tries to make their time horizons the same and uniform because they think there is a singular way to have sprints and they have to be 2 weeks, or they have to have quarterly check-ins. Just because the company does that does not mean that the startup needs to do that. And maybe it needs monthly check-ins. Maybe they need daily stand-ups that are with a broader team than just Eng. I know when I was in the startup world, I was pretty much syncing with the CEO daily, if not every other day. So it's just a different time horizon that you're planning, because as a younger, or I'll say like a less mature product or business, as you're starting out, you need to make sure that things are on track much more frequently than a big ship that's already been out to sea a few times. And so those earlier products or companies have to have a time horizon that's a lot shorter than bigger companies. And so you're probably having a cadence of road mapping, sprint check-ins, strategic conversations much more frequently, because you also only have time. You know how much time you have, you know how much money is in the bank, and you know how much runway you got. So in 18 months, we got to deliver this in order to get the next round of funding and be able to achieve X, Y, and Z. Whereas the privilege, I guess, that we have at Square is we know that in 18 months, we're not going to completely fall apart. The company is stronger in terms of its unit economics than that, and we've already passed some of those hurdles. So we can look at a roadmap and say 2-year time horizons and say that this is something we're going to invest in now, even though we know that's not going to be until a 2022 type of initiative. Or a release. And so we have time horizons that are much different. Then we can have the check-ins, and the cadence is going to be a lot longer, because we need to make sure that whatever we're shipping, the code has to be scalable immediately. You can't not make payments work. That is the one core thing of, like, people need to get their money. We can't just, move fast and break things. I want to move fast, but we're not going to break anything. So move as fast as you can without breaking things, because this is people's livelihoods. And so it's just a difference of the risk profile that we're willing to do, and then the time horizon.
Cool. Thanks.
Good. What's your take on roadmaps with delivery dates?
Oh, this feels like I'm walking into the lion's den with this question. So I know there's different schools of thought on this. Maybe this is such a consulting answer, but I think it depends. I think it really is very much, you can use the now, next, later framework. And I think that's really great especially if you're sharing that with customers, and you don't want to say, here's the date that we're going to deliver something, so that not to overpromise and underdeliver. When I think about it from my lens, sitting here at Square, we have to have dates. There's just too many organizations and sub-organizations where different dependencies from one team, we rely on like those things getting shorter for us to make our deadlines. And we have certain development windows where if you don't hit that window and ship code during that time, you got to wait till the next window. We're not just doing a continual delivery type of thing, because again, we're working in payments. Things have to be buttoned up and QA'd to the nth degree. So we have to have dates. And it's an interesting place to be post startups, where it was a very different culture for me to go, we're not just going to ship this afternoon. Why don't we just release it? Who cares? That's why I say it depends. For me now, looking back on that, it has to be pretty tight, and you have to be really good at project management as a product manager in that type of scenario and that type of scale. For those that like are able to pivot and move a bit more quickly and agile, then I think having dates might hinder you. And that's why people like the now, next, later as a way to kind of also talk to upward management type of thing, to, again, not over promise and under deliver. But in certain situations, roadmaps, it's critical that we have dates.
So you touched on something that's always fascinating to me, right? Part of going from so transition seems like you've just mastered the art of some of the most difficult transitions that a product person actually does in their career, changing vertical, startup to larger company, and moving from acclimatizing yourself to where you would ship every day to kind of wondering, oh, I have a release window.
Yeah.
How does one go about that? What are some tricks or tips that you have for people wanting to go through transitions in general?
Ooh, what I find the most helpful is talking to the customers, talking to who you're serving. Because for me, as I kind of think about, I was just talking to a young PM earlier today, actually, and he was wondering how to pick where he wants to do PMing full time after graduation. And to me, it's always been kind of a selfish thing, but what am I going to learn? What kind of drives me? Who do I want to serve? Those are the things that I think are more interesting than the hot new industry or the coolest new latest startup that's growing. I know myself, and I could never join like a gaming company as a PM because I don't do that. I can't empathize with that user. I don't even know, like I haven't played a game since this 8-bit Super Mario's. So I would have no business being in the gaming industry. But for me, I've started small businesses. My dad was an entrepreneur. And so I really love the SMB space. I love talking to those customers, really understanding what drives them and what their needs are. And so moving to something that's around payments as part of that business was interesting and exciting to me. Similarly, when I moved into one of the developer tools products that I was in way back when, I talked to a friend of mine who's a developer, and I said, I want you to just like spend 2 hours, use this API, let me know what you built, and then I'll buy you lunch. And that was how I decided whether or not I wanted to work at this company, because I could see this API and I could see how it would work, but I wanted to hear it from a customer. And without having that customer input, I just kind of brought a friend to be that customer input. And if I thought that was like an interesting conversation where I was like, oh, I could see how this could unlock X, Y, and Z for you, and see those wheels turning in his mind, to me, that would be something interesting that I'd want to work on. And so I think of transitions as I don't know, it's not, there aren't really boundaries unless you put boundaries up in your head. And so go back to the fundamentals of being a product person is really building something that serves someone else. Do you care about what you're building and what you're putting out there? And who are you serving? And can you empathize with that type of person? And that's all at the core of all it is, right?
And that's such an excellent response. Thank you for sharing that, because this brings in a lot of the stuff from jobs to be done, hiring yourself to actually kind of figure out, do I want to be part of this? Connecting the dots between the customer, the end user, the offering, and kind of figuring those things out. Experimentation, prototype. I love that part. This is the sort of recruiting a resource to actually test something out for you. You're doing an A/B testing and a prototype without actually going through a lot of process to do that. So that's excellent. No, thank you for sharing. Pradeep, back to you.
Yep, thank you. So we talk about talking to customers very frequently. And when I first started out talking to junior PMs who were starting out in their careers, they were afraid to talk to customers because their employers, their managers have said, don't bother the customers, right? So how do you go about instilling that customer interaction when being told by managers, no, you cannot? And once you are able to get access to customers, how often should product managers talk with customers?
I might get in trouble for this, but I don't think you should be at a place that doesn't let you talk to customers. That is not a product. Okay, great.
That was my advice. Start looking for a new job.
Yeah, I think so, because you're just going to be bashing your head against a wall for a very long time if management or the company culture isn't a product-led type of culture or a customer-centric type of culture. If we're not all here to serve our customer, then we're just, writing up internal memos all day, every day. So I think that's my response is similar to yours for that first part. And I'd say for how often, as often as you possibly can. I think it's so important and such an anchor for keeping a pulse on who is your base and who's using the product or how they're changing the usage of your product. It's not like this one and done type of thing. You can have like very targeted research that might be one and done or like 1 week, and you really wanted to focus on this one question. But I think regular interactions with customers is so crucial and so important and enlightening at all times.
Definitely. Okay. What skills, would you have wished you had developed early in your career? So, when you were starting out to where you are now, you've excelled tremendously. What skills do you think you would have liked to improved when you were first starting out?
Yeah, I think so. My undergrad was in computer engineering, and I loved math and the typical nerd type of profile. And so one of the things that even from the academic days, I never really wrote that much. And I think writing is it's a skill that we don't talk about in product very often, but it's so important. And I remember pretty much the first 3 years of undergrad, the most I would write is bullet points or equations. And it wasn't until my senior year, philosophy or psychology elective that I had to take that I even wrote a blue book. And so it was like, oh, wow. So people actually write this much. But it's not really even about the amount of writing or things like that. But I think there's something so important about keeping up with that skill that I've learned in most recently at Square that I love now. It was a very hard thing for me to kind of get over that hump, but I absolutely love the practice now. It's one of my biggest learnings, but I think writing forces editing, and that editing creates clarity with conciseness. It's right now I'm speaking in a lot of stream of consciousness, but my writing has the ability to be edited, and so I can write with a very focused purpose to the text. And I think because as PMs we have this seemingly unlimited amounts of data or input that comes at us in order to create output that's clean and focused. And to me, what's helped is writing things down, being able to provide that direction to the team, being able to repeat that type of stuff. That all helps in that clarity of communications, helps you make useful products and make good decisions. So I'd say writing is probably the skill that I wish I'd got more development of. And maybe more precise editing is what I think is really important, and would love to have developed earlier in my career.
If I may, I would want to build on that. I mean, that's an incredible point. What have you, again, I mean, I just can't marvel at the fact that so many transitions you've done through. Everything is a massive transition. What worked that has made you a better editor over a period of time? There's often said that when you write, don't edit yourself, because allow that stream of consciousness, as the phrase you used, let it all come out, and then go back with a very sharp way of doing editing. Often I see folks, and me included, you get in the habit of trying to edit while you're writing, and then just it's a mental block. What has worked for you that could help a early to mid PM to get better at this skill?
Yeah, I find for me, I need to force myself to sleep on it. I have to actively say, put this away, because I'd love to just send things out and just be done with things. And it's almost like a to-do list. And so you just want to get it done. But sleeping on it and rereading is, every time I do that, every single time, even months later, I'm like, what was I trying to explain here? What was the purpose of this? This doesn't make any sense. I could take this entire chunk out. I can rewrite this into a sentence instead of a paragraph. And I think it just helps me kind of go back to what was the intention of writing this? What should the reader actually get from this and walk away with? If there's one or two messages, what am I to say? And everything else is probably extra. And so giving it space, giving it time to walk away from that problem and think of new ways to either say it or deconstruct it, and that's very clarifying for people so that they are along with you. I kind of think of it as like, the show your work in a math equation. Whenever your teacher would have to like say, you moved from this to this just because you knew the answer because you put it into a calculator. I need you to show your work. That's how I see it, as like, help me understand the logical deconstruction. You went from this super ambiguous problem to why we need to go do these steps as the recommended path forward. And it's, I think that's my biggest learning, is like, take some space, get away from it for a little while, make sure it makes sense in the morning, and send it out.
That's awesome. Hey, since we're speaking with someone who's so good at transitions, maybe we'll try doing a transition ourselves and see if we do it. You moved, changing topics, or transitioning into out of product management and into angel investment. You're an angel investor. You actually run the collective that you mentioned at the top. Tell us a little bit about it. How did you get to be doing this, and what's it all about?
Yeah, sure. Transparent Collective was something that was born out of necessity from all of us, I guess. We kind of, so my friends and I are all from the Midwest. We came out of Michigan together, and we found ourselves out on the West Coast. And a few of us had tried starting things before, either in the Midwest or on the East Coast, and then came out here and realized, oh, everything's different in Silicon Valley. Everybody knows these like cultural things that are happening and how to get into the certain places, but no one's really telling you. It's a lot of tribal knowledge. And even the pitch decks that worked in Chicago investing land were very different, did not work in Silicon Valley investing land. And so we got together one night, and my friend pitched this idea of like, let's just start something where we make that change. We're all, I guess, entrepreneurial. And so it wasn't even like we should go join forces with somebody. It was like, let's just start it. We should just build it. And that's really what we did. So we built this collective, and the intention is we share information transparently with one another. Who are the investors to talk to? Who are the investors not to talk to? Name names, and we'll say, here's what you should do in your pitch deck. And we'll kind of like completely deconstruct it again and build it all the way back up. Or like, who should you be talking to? Where does this business plan not make any sense? And then you have this huge flaw in it, those types of things. And so it's a incubator / accelerator, really, because we don't take any equity. We don't ask for any money from any of these entrepreneurs. We just want to change the face of what a tech entrepreneur means and, change the demographics of that. So all we ask in return is that the batches that come through into our workshops and educational seminars, just pass it forward. Just take the learning and make sure that more underrepresented folks find out about it. So through that, over the years, I was a mentor and advisor to a lot of startups. Just realized I got so much energy from that. It was not a draining thing, even though event planning is very draining to me. But the actual event itself and that week was so much fun. And so that was, 5 years ago, maybe 6. And then I started putting in small checks here and there. And I was like, all right, I know this person now after a year and a half of like continuing the conversation. And so you start putting in smaller checks, and then those checks somehow get bigger. And all of a sudden you're an angel investor. And apparently, as long as you put it on LinkedIn, it's a thing. So that's my route to angel investing. It's one of my friends said, there's only 2 roles that you can wake up and call yourself, and that becomes your title. One is CEO, and the other is angel investor.
That's well put. So how does one apply to Transparent Collective? Is there through a entry process happens once, or what's the method for somebody who's listening to our audience to be able to do this?
Sweet. Thank you for letting me plug. The next batch, the next cohort of TC founders is coming through. Like, we're going to make our decisions at the end of March. So applications are due then for an end of April cohort. So if anyone listening is an entrepreneur or knows underrepresented entrepreneurs, they can go to transparentcollective.com, hit the apply button, and we ask some basic questions about your business. And we keep it as much as we can, take out the best of the process. So we'll usually review the startup based on like the market, the current traction, the competitors, all of that stuff, and take up names and people so that we don't, bias ourselves. But we've been getting a lot of try. So when we started, it was all just our second degree connections that we were like, you guys should come out here, even though you don't know us. We'll fly you out here and we'll help you. And then that it just created a flow of word of mouth. We've done zero marketing. And I think in our last batch, we had over 100 applicants. I can tell you for this batch, it's getting close to 100 already, but it even being at the end of February, like we're in early February. So we're excited that, this is something that people are, interested in, want to be part of. We have had over 40 startups in Transparent Collective, raising over 300 million, I think, collectively. So it's been fun. It's been great to see the amount of success that these founders have had.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. Look, unlocking or crashing the gates or helping more people kind of get over the gatekeeping across, whether it's products or funding or whatever help people need is extremely exceptional. But let me transition again and go back to the previous topic, the skills that you have as a product manager to assess and build market awareness and those kinds of things. Some are obvious, but what are some other skills that were there that you learned as a PM that allowed you to be such awesome for starting the collective and be able to offer guidance and help to young entrepreneurs?
I mean, I think I didn't really know what I was doing when I was starting it out. I was like, maybe I can help. Let's see what happens. And I think that's most entrepreneurs too. It's very much like this. Let's just see what happens. And what I've learned over the years is, as PMs, no matter how early in your career, we have a lot of information that we don't even know we've retained in our brains of either frameworks or ways of starting to set up processes, even at a young company, to make sure that they can scale and be long-lived within that company culture. And founders will take as much help as they can get on that kind of stuff. It's a very lonely road to be an entrepreneur at times. And so if you can get advice or start brainstorming things or bounce ideas off of other people who've done things before, it's so helpful. And so no matter how early you are in your career, you can always be helpful to the founder. And as you kind of get more experienced in the product field, I think there's like even spidey sense that you can provide of like, I get what you're trying to do here and you can try it, but I'm just going to tell you, I don't think that'll work. And here's some reasons why. I can't really place exactly what's going to happen because I don't know your customer base or things like that, but here's what I'm worried about. And so I think most times it's pretty spot on, even just using some spidey sense. And you start trying to communicate the right frameworks and processes. But at some point, it's just kind of like, you can see the same ingredient. An investor said this to me once. He was like, you can see the same ingredient at the table. You'll see the sugar, you'll see the butter, you'll see the chocolate, and you'll walk away from this conversation with either like someone on your team or a founder or anybody, and you'll think they're going to make some chocolate chip cookies. And then a week or 2 weeks later, a month later, they come back and they bring you a souffle, and you're like, what is this? What just happened? And so sometimes it's about resetting my own expectations as an investor too, because using the jobs to be done framework, the souffle did the same job cookie. They just did it differently. And then other times, that souffle is going to be so much harder to make than a cookie. Why would you take the hardest path possible? And let's just get the cookie out and see if that actually solves the problem. Hopefully these analogies and metaphors.
This is an excellent way to put it out there. No, it's amazing. And I'm so happy you're actually bringing the jobs to be done framework. I wish more early to mid-stage PM, if they're not familiar, to look up the jobs to be done framework as a product manager. It just resets and recalibrates a lot of different things to put roll products out there.
Totally. I really love it.
It just streamlines. Pradeep?
Yep. So going from a PM function, you've gained a lot of tools, frameworks, skill sets. As you transition into angel investments, what skills were you able to transfer over? And for PMs who are on not the junior, but the mid to senior level stage, and if they want to transfer and move into angel investing, what skills do you think they should look to develop early on?
Yeah, fair. I think there's 3 things you need to be an angel investor. You need capital, either your money or someone else's money. You need deal flow. You need to know who's starting companies, either like past coworkers, friends, people in an industry that you're really a subject matter expert in, or just know that circle, that ecosystem really well, something you're passionate about. And then you need some expertise. So for product folks, I think product as a generalist is sufficient, and you just have to find what areas that you're really great at, and you can say, this is what I'm going to bring to the table. Maybe it's about customer discovery, and you're just so amazing at interviewing and like really understanding needs, and you can help them at the early stages. Maybe it's about pricing and, you know, bits of like marketing and go-to-market areas, and so that could be an expertise that you bring to the table. And so I think those are the three things. I'd say the benefit, there's always the cost benefit analysis that I think people should be doing before just going into angel investing, because it's not something that you do in order to make money. I'll go with the cons first. So most investments will go to zero, and let's just take that and put that on the table, because you should not be doing this in the hopes that you're going to invest in the next Uber and make gazillions of dollars. In order to even make money, you almost need like this huge diversification of your early stage portfolio. So you have to make a ton of bets. So that means instead of investing $25,000 into one company, maybe you need $1,000 into 25 companies. And these companies are very early stage. You could be talking to pre-seed or seed stage companies. So then your investment is illiquid for 5-10 years. And if you're thinking about just ROI calculations, what I usually tell people that are in this early stages, just put into a market. You're going to be making it's liquid, and you're making 10% in the capital markets right now. So don't use this as a way to kind of make money. But what I love about angel investing is I think it's a great way to pay it forward. It kind of follows the Transparent Collective goals that we had, which was helping a new generation of founders and innovators. And I love meeting folks with that kind of energy and those dreamers. And it's just fun for me to have those conversations. I find it selfishly educational. I think it's a great way to learn about an industry or product line or business that I don't have to go do any work into. This person has been thinking about this space for a year plus, and I can just ask a bunch of great questions, and I learn a lot from even meeting people but never investing, or investing and seeing their progress over the years. So for me, it's fun to meet those types of folks. And then like there's this really small piece in the back of my brain being like, maybe this is a 50x rate for me. Maybe, but it's probably not. But that is the last thing in my consideration. So for people that are thinking about angel investing as a way to make money, I'd say don't do it for that reason. But for product people that are interested in it as a way to kind of help connect dots outside of your local product line or business units, I think it's fantastic. You get to see this macro level of like tons. I mean, right now there's a ton of fintech startups happening. I get to talk to a bunch of them and start seeing like, okay, they're working on this space specifically, and then these guys are working on this space. And if these two ever cross, that could be really interesting. Maybe if they cross and did another third generation of that, that could be something that would be challenging for Square. So I need to keep an eye on that as like a macro trend. And so it's an educational pattern for me, and it's a fun way to network. I think that's probably the two key things that as product people we can take away from it.
Definitely, that's definitely awesome advice there. Now, what's something that you would recommend PMs should take away from our session today?
You know what I have in front of me? I started reading Bob Iger's book. I don't know if you guys have read this.
Yep.
CEO of Disney. And I just started it, but I really loved, he had at the beginning, he has these leadership takeaways or principles. And one of the bullets was the relentless pursuit of perfection. And so let's see, I'm just going to read it here. But if you let me plagiarize from him as like the key takeaway. So the relentless pursuit of perfection. So this doesn't mean perfectionism at all costs, but it does mean refusal to accept mediocrity or make excuses for something being good enough. if you believe that something can be made better, put in the effort to do it. And if you're in the business of making things, be in the business of making things great. And I think that relentless pursuit of perfection is something that we do all day, every day as PMs. We're never going to get there. It's this goal that's just this far away from us every time we move. But I love the idea of the pursuit of perfection.
Awesome. Wow, that is incredible, and quite a way to bring us towards the close of this. So appreciate, it's incredible to think about all the different things that you're doing, you continue to add value to, and the relentless pursuit of perfection. I think you've managed that very well so far, and we continue to look forward to you doing more of that in the future.
Thank you both for having me. These were fun questions to think about.
Thank you so much. So I've got your Twitter handle there. So if you're not following Rohini right now, there's a Twitter handle. Go follow her. Thank you so much, Rohini. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you.